Okay, Boker Tov, a good Moed, Moedim L'Simcha, a good Yontif, a happy Sukkot. And so this is the second day of Chol Moed in Chutz La'aretz. And today's daf is Nun Aleph 51. We're going to start on the bottom of Nun Amud Beis, bottom of 50b at the Mishnah. This is by far the trickiest daf since we started studying Kiddushin. So we'll do the best we can. Makadesh Isho Bita, a man who betroths his wife and a wife and a daughter, a woman and a daughter at the exact same time. Now, it's one of the ervas that a man can't marry a woman and her daughter. So if a man tries to marry them at the same time, O Isha v'achosa, or a woman and her sister, which is another erva, you can't marry a woman and then marry her sister. He's trying to do it at the same time. Ka'achas inam mekudashos. He's not going to be betrothed to either one. It's not a valid betrothal. It doesn't take effect. So there was an incident where there were 5 women. Amongst these 5 women were 2 sisters. One person collected a basket of their figs, but it was Shel Shvius Isa, but it was a sabbatical year, so the figs were hefker. They weren't owned by anybody. Amar Hare Kulchem Mekudashosli. And he said, I'm betrothing all of you with these figs. With this basket. And one of the women received the basket on behalf of all of them. The Chum said, the sisters are not betrothed because you can't betroth 2 women at the same time, but the other 3 women are betrothed. And the Gemara is going to have to discuss how we make sense of this Mishnah. But first, the Gemara's first question is, how do we know that if you try to betroth 2 women who are ervas, who are related to each other, you can't marry? How do we know that the marriage doesn't take effect? Menani Mili, what's our source for this idea? So Amar Amin Bar Chama, it's based upon the fact that the verse states, it's a pasuk. It says in the pasuk, a woman and her sister, you're not able to marry with shore. So Torah Amra, so Torah is telling us, when you make them your co-wives, then it doesn't even, the betrothal effect doesn't even take effect on even one of them. Meaning, say if you try to marry both at the same time, and neither one is married. So remember, Chama has a pasuk. So Amrei Rava says, well, if that's the case, what about the fact that the pasuk says, "V'nichrasu anefashos"? A few psukim later, it says, if you marry two of these women, you're going to be cut off. Mikarav Amam, you're going to get kares. Now, Kiddushin l'tafsi. If we're talking about a situation where you marry them both at the same time, and so therefore the Kiddushin doesn't take effect, kares mi mechayev, then why are you liable for kares? So therefore, it must be that what are we referring to? That's not a case of pasuk must not be referring to where you're trying to marry 2 women v'asachas. Rather, must be the pasuk is referring to where you marry 1 woman, then you're trying to marry another woman. And the Mishnah is like Rabbo says, Kol shena b'zeh. Anytime you can't marry 2 women at the same time, then even at the same time it doesn't take effect. Meaning to say that the pasuk is referring to trying to marry 2 women at the same time, 2 women one after the other, and Rabbah comes along and from Svara, from his logic, says, well, if you can't marry one woman after the other woman, means say if they're prohibited to marry at the same time, you can't marry one after the other. And by logic, we're going to say that if you try to marry them both at the same time, it doesn't take effect. That's Rabbah's position. Any woman who you can't marry after you marry the first one, like for example, a daughter after you marry her mother, then if you try to marry them both at the same time, it doesn't take effect. So the Gemara says, let's analyze the statement of Rabbah. What's the source for it? Gufa, Amar Rabbah, Kol Sheinu B'Zeh Chazeh, Fil V'Asach Haseinu. So that's Rabbah's teaching. So Abaye challenges it. Esvei Abaye. Abaye challenges this teaching of Rabbah, and Abaye is going to bring 3 possible challenges to Rabbah. Gemara is going to reject all 3 of these possible attempts to disprove Rabbah. The first is from Amarba Ma'aser Peiros of Mitukanim. I'm Rabbi Meiser. So Rashi says what we're talking about here is where you have 5 measures of the produce, and you separate 1/5 of that. Normally, Meiser is 10%, so you separate more than what you're required to. So therefore, under those circumstances, we're going to say that the fruit, the other 80%, the peiros of misukanim, they're going to be fixed, meaning to say it's as though you took Meiser from them, and they're no longer designated as tevel, and so you can eat them. Uma'isros mikukolim, but the 1/5 that you measured is messed up. Why? Because 10% of it is meiser, but the other 10% you can't designate more than 10% as meiser. So the other 10% wasn't tied, so it's tefel. So therefore, we have this 1/5. Part of it is meiser, but part of it is not meiser. So it's untied. So it's mekulkol. So you can't eat any of it because it's tefel and you can't eat it. So the Gemara says v'amai. But why? Nema kol she'eno b'zechar zeh afil v'asachas. So why do we say that why do we say that the first 80% are peiros and half of the other 20% are meiser? Why don't we say, since you can't if you would have tried to take the meiser after you already took the meiser, it wouldn't work. So therefore, taking it at the same time, it also doesn't work. So this is a proof against Rava. So Rava would answer, Shani meiser. No, meiser is different. Diesel chatzai meiser is fundamentally different because there's this aspect to it that you could take half. You could take a kernel of grain and take half of it for a tithe, half of that grain. So therefore, since it has this aspect, we could say from that 1/5, it wasn't that 10% and 10%. It was part of that. Each grain was taken 10%. Each grain was taken half of it for the meiser. So it's an unusual law, and that's why it works there. As we state, dietmar tiskadesh palga kacha. Because if you would say that half of the grain would be tithed, it would indeed be tithed. So therefore, we're not going to challenge. That's why it works b'bas achas, because it has a separate law. And now we have a second attack against Rava. So what's the law of Meiser Behema? Meiser Behema is that when you have 10 calves born, you take 9 of them through a pen and you say, this belongs to me. And the 10th one, you say, this is for Hashem. You mark it with a red paint, bring it to Yerushalayim, and then it's to be in Kiddushin. So, Meiser Behema, Deleko Chatzain, that you can't put 2 animals through the 10th pen at the same time and take half of each one. It doesn't work. And then once you do the 10th one, you can't do the 11th one. The 11th one is not going to be for Hashem. It's only the 10th one. But Amar Rabba, and yet Rabba taught, Yatsu Shnayim, or no, we have a different Girsa here, and the different Girsa says maybe it's not Rabba, but it's Rabba. So it says, Amar Rabba, Yatsu Shnayim Basiri. Let's say 2 of them went out together to be the 10th one. Vikaran Asiri, Vachad Asar, Vikaran Asiri, and you call them both the 10th. So then we say that what these are Asiri Vachad Asar Muravim Zebazeh. We say that their 10th and 11 are mixed together. But why? Why do we say that? Since you can't do it about you can't do the 11th one, you can't make it holy. So then why are you saying that the 10th and 11th go out together, that one of them is holy? So it's another question on Rabbah. If we say, Kol she'enu b'zechar zeh enu b'bas achas. So Gemara explains, no, the case of Meiser Behema is different. Shani Meiser Behema, the Isa B'tos. Meiser Behema, since you can make it the 11th one holy by mistake, since we can have toes, there's a mistaken aspect to it that it still takes effect. Therefore, we're going to say it could happen in this case at the same time. The Tanakh, because we learned in the Mishnah in Bechoros, we learned Kara Achi Asiri. Let's say for some reason you call the 9th one the 10th one, and for some reason you call the Asiri the Chi, the 10th one the 9th one, or Achad Asar Asiri, and for some reason you call the 11th one the 10th one. Shloshta Mekudashin, that all 3 of them are going to be considered to be Mekudish. And so with the status of a sacred korban. And so we see from here, and those circumstances, the Mishnah in Bechoros tells us that the 9th one, which they call the 10th one, that has to graze until it gets a mum, and then it could be in with a blemish. The 10th one, which was called the 9th one, that's the meiser, and the 11th one that was called the 10th one is brought as a shlomim. So we see from here that says this aspect of unique law that is mekadesh betos, that it could be betrothed as a mistake. So therefore, that's the reason why it could be why if they do it b'basachas it works. So therefore, it's a unique case also. So now the Gemara brings its third and final attack on Rava. So the Gemara says, Hare Toda, what about the Thanksgiving offering? The Leisa Betos, the Leisa Nami B'zachar, it doesn't work if it's a mistake. It also doesn't work if it's one after the other. So what's the halacha of the Toda? That if a person has 4 reasons why he has to bring a carbon Toda, if he got out of jail, survived the wilderness, went through the sea journey, and he recovered from an illness, he's chayav to bring an animal with 40 loaves of bread, the zevach and the 40 loaves of bread. But you can't bring, if you try to bring more loaves of bread, it doesn't take effect. And so that's what our Mishnah is, that's what the proof is. Vidmar, we learned in the Mishnah in Menachos Toda. So if let's say you have a carbon Toda, shenishchata al shmonim chalos. Let's say you have a carbon Toda that you slaughtered with 80 loaves of bread. Means say you really only allowed to do 40, but in this case you did 80. Chizkiah Amar Kachila Arbaim. Chizkiah said 40 mitoch shmonim. 40 out of those 80 are considered holy. Rabbi Yochanan says Lo Kachila Arbaim mitoch shmonim. Rabbi Yochanan says no, we have not consecrated even 40 out of those 80. And so we see from here that Chizkiah is saying even though you do it all 80 at the same time, 40 of them are going to be consecrated, which is a proof against Rava, because if you would do it one after the other, it wouldn't work. So at the same time, it shouldn't work either. So it's a question against Rava, who says, because Chizkiah is saying 40 of them are holy. So the says, no, that case is also different. Didn't we explain that? What's that referring to? Everybody agrees that where you said consecrate 40 from the 80, that if you say, I only want to consecrate 40 out of these 80, kachi, then it would be consecrated. Or because we're saying basically, I'm worried that 40 of them are going to be lost. So I'm consecrating 40 out of the 80. Everybody says that works. Also, if you say, lo yikdashu arba'im elam kein kachi shmonim, but if you say, I'm only consecrating 40, if you also consecrate all 80, then it doesn't work. When do Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan argue, el b'stam, where you just consecrate 80. So Chizkiah says it's okay, that you're really just trying to consecrate all, you're saying it on a condition. I'm consecrating these 40, but if they're lost, then I'll use the other 40. Meaning to say I'm only consecrating the ones that'll still be around when it comes time to eat the korban. But that's what Chizkiah says. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says, no, under those circumstances, you're really intending to bring 80, and so therefore none of them take effect. So Gemara says, why does Rava have to give this forced explanation of Rava, who says that anything that doesn't work at the same one after the other doesn't work at the same time? Why doesn't he apply his own principle? Kiddushin. Why doesn't he apply his own principle that it won't take effect? Because if you're not sure who you betrothed, the mother or the daughter, you can't marry either one. It doesn't take effect because it's what's called a Kiddushin Shemasur. It's a betrothal that you can't consummate. And a betrothal that you can't consummate, Rava says, doesn't take effect. That's what we're going to spend the next part of the Gemara on. Why? That's Rava's position. So why doesn't it apply that answer? Here he says, no, with Rav Rami Bar Chama Kamar. Rava was just responding to Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama brought a pasuk, and the pasuk says that it doesn't take effect. And Rava says, no, that pasuk is not referring to Ba'asachas. That pasuk is referring to one after the other. And Ba'asachas, we all have to learn out from a svara, from a logic. That's a very tricky piece of Gemara, but now Gemara is going to go into a debate. So it's also tricky about Rava's principle. Rava's principle is Kiddushin Shemasur Labia, that if it's a Kiddushin, we learned that you cannot, that there's no possible legal way to consummate the marriage. Abaye Amar Ave Kiddushin. Abaye says it's a valid betrothal, and Rava says lo Ave Kiddushin. Rava says it's not a valid betrothal. So now Rava says, what's my logic? Amar Rava Barahina Isberi. Barahina taught me, it says in the pasuk, Yikach ish isha uba'alah. When a man takes a woman to be his wife and he consummates it with her. So we learn from here that in order for it to be a valid marriage, it has to be a Kiddushin, a Masur L'Biyah of a Kiddushin. If the Kiddushin is capable of being consummated, that's a valid Kiddushin. Kiddushin, Shem Masur L'Biyah, but if the Kiddushin is not capable of being consecrated, it's not a valid Kiddushin. That's Rava's position, which Abaye argues with. So the Gemara first challenges him from our Mishnah. It says, "Hamakadesh isha ubita," and our Gemara is going to suggest, I'll say it outright at the beginning, that outside that the Gemara is going to suggest that our Mishnah could be a proof either for Rava or Abaye. So both Rava and Abaye, the only way they can say that our Mishnah doesn't contradict them is, but each of them have to change the text of our Mishnah. So let's see how it works. So it says on our Mishnah that if someone wants to betroth a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her sister at the same time, ka'achas and a mekudeshes, says in our Mishnah, if you betroth them at the same time, it's not a valid betrothal, which implies that achas misha vita, but if you wanted to betroth one, it says I'm betrothing one of you, either one of you, the woman and her daughter, or one of you, the woman and her sister, then it is a valid betrothal. So it says the Gemara isn't disapprove against Rava, because why would it be a valid betrothal? V'amai Kiddushin shem isur and then isn't this a Kiddushin where you can't consummate it? So how? Because since you don't know which one you married, you can never be with either of them. So it cannot be with either of them. So therefore, it's not a valid betrothal. So this is the question, because our Mishnah implies it is valid. So valid in that case, it's a question on Rava. You have to do Rava. So Rava would say, no, but I have a question against you. According to your logic, Seifa. What's the last clause? There's an incident with 5 women, and then amongst these 5 women, there were 2 sisters. And so amongst these 5 women, there were 2 sisters, and then you gathered the basket, gathered the basket of figs. And the basket belonged to the women. And what was the basket of fruit? And you say, all of them are betrothed to me with this basket. Under those circumstances, the Chachamim taught, the sisters are not betrothed. So Rava now asks the question, the 2 sisters are not betrothed, but the other 3 women are betrothed under those circumstances. Now, what are we talking about? What's the kimta? If he says, I'm betrothing all of you, that won't work, because that's a case of kani at v'chamorhu. It's where you're trying to acquire 2 things. This is a case of at v'chamor from Baba Basra, where Raj says we're referring to a person who says to a woman and her fetus, I want you and the fetus to both acquire this. And since the fetus can't acquire something, the woman can't acquire it either. So if you're saying I'm betrothing all of you, then none of them should be acquired, because the violation of this principle of kani at v'chamor. At v'chamor lo kana, as we say in Baba Basra, that if you say that, it doesn't work. So therefore, it must be that what's the scenario of this Mishnah, says Rava on the top of Nanalach Hamabeis, Oav, Ta'amar Achas Mikem. He says, I'm betrothing one of you, Vikatani, and yet we say, Ein Achayos Mikudashos. So he said, and yet he says, in the case where he says, I'm betrothing one of you, and so he says, I'm betrothing one of you, and yet it states that the sisters are not betrothed. And so we see from here that in a circumstance where he says betrothing one of you, that the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. And this is exactly like Rava, and not like Abaye, because Rava says, Kiddushin will have a Kiddushin. And Abaye would say, would be a Kiddushin. So he would be betrothed to one of them, and they would all require, those 2 sisters would require both a divorce out of a doubt. So it's a question against the Abaye. It's a proof for Rava. So Rava kasha Reisha. Rava has a problem with the Reisha, because the Reisha implies that if you betroth one of them, it would be a valid betrothal, and Abaye kasha safe. And for Abaye, the safe is difficult, because it implies that if you betroth one of them under those circumstances, it would be a valid betrothal. So Abaye mitaretz l'tamei and Rava mitaretz b'tamei. Abaye is going to explain the Mishnah like him, and Rava will explain the Mishnah like him. Abaye mitaretz l'tamei. Abaye explains, how do we explain the second clause of the Mishnah? We explain like this. It just starts off by saying, "Mekadesh isha vita isha v'achosa ka'achas in a mekudeshes." You try to betroth these 2 women at the same time, it's not a valid betrothal, which implies, like we asked against Rava, achas misha vita misha v'achosa mekudeshes. But if you just betroth one of them from a woman and her daughter, one of them from a woman and her sister, it would be a valid betrothal. Vim Amar, but then Abaye has a sin if he says, anyone who is able to be consummated with me, mean to say not the 2 sisters, because out of a suffix you wouldn't be able to be with either one, then Eina Mekudeshes. If he says Via Tiskadishli, then neither of the sisters would be able to be betrothed. So then none of the sisters are going to be betrothed because he's not able to have Bia with either one. So then Umay Sanami Bechamesh Nashim, and then he goes to the last clause of the Mishnah. If there's an incident with 5 women, and he says, whichever one of you is able to be with me should be betrothed to me. So Abaye has to add in those words that he makes that he adds in this specific clause, one who is worthy to be with me, meaning to say who's able to be with me, should be betrothed to me. And he amends the Mishnah to add that, and that's why he's saying that it's not betrothed under those circumstances in the case of one at a time, because he added in that phrase, whereas Rava Matar Sotame, Rava also has to amend the Mishnah. What is Rava going to say? Because remember, Rava says, if you try to betroth one at a time, it doesn't work because we don't know which one, and so therefore it's a Kiddushin Shem Mesur Bia. So Rava Matar Sotame, because he says, what does our Mishnah say? Amekadesh Achas Meisho Bita. So then he has to add in this phrase that it's not that the Mishnah is talking about the phrase is not Amekadesh Isho Bita, but it's Amekadesh Achas Meisho Bita. He's saying, I'm betrothing a one of you from, well, we just had a special appearance. So we're so Rava with Matar Satame, Amekadesh Achas Meisho Bita, or Achas Meisha Vachosa. Let's say you betroth one of a woman and her daughter, or one of a woman and her sister, meaning Rava changes it from saying that the first case of Mishnah is where he betrothed both at the same time. You only betrothed one of them at a time. Then Naase Kamisha Kiddush Isha Bita. Then Rava is saying it's like you try to betroth two women at the same time, it doesn't work because it's not Mesur Labia. And there's an incident Bechamesh Nashim with 5 women, Ubahem Shtei Achayos. Says you, all of you, and one of these 2 women are betrothed to me. So basically, Rava reads the last line of the Mishnah even more explicitly to completely support his reading that even if you just say I'm betrothed to one of you 2 sisters, it's not going to be a valid betrothal since you don't know which one. It's a Kiddushin Shem Mesur Labia. So the Gemara says basically our Mishnah can't be approved for either Abaye or Rava because they both have to amend the text. It's difficult for both of them. Now the Gemara is going to bring several more proofs against Rava to support Abaye. And in the end, the Gemara is going to conclude that we're not going to get to it on today's daf, but this is going to be one of the 6 cases in Shas where the halacha is like Abaye. And this is what's called the Yal Kagam, the 6 cases where the halacha is like Abaye. This is the kuf of Yal Kagam, Kiddushin Shem Mesur Labia, betrothal that cannot be consummated, that we say it's a valid betrothal. So we're on 51b, 4 lines after the lines begin to get wide. So now the Gemara again attempts to prove that Rava is wrong. Tashma Mekadesh Bito Stam. We have this Mishnah we're going to get to Be'ezras Hashem Yisparach in 13 days and Samach Daled Amud Beis. We say Mekadesh Bito Stam, that if you just say I'm betrothing my daughter, so what takes effect? And presumably the Gemara's assumption here is that the man has adult daughters and minor daughters. So Eina Bogros Bechal. He's not intending to betroth his adult daughters with that. Only the minor daughters. So the Gemara asks, doesn't that imply? Don't we learn from the Mishnah that he's intending, because the man can't betroth his adult daughters. So he just says to the man, I'm betrothing my daughters, it must mean his minor daughters. Hakatamas Baklal, so it means he's betrothing both of his minor daughters, but why does it take effect? Isn't it since the man who he betrothed his daughters to won't be able to consummate with either one because he's not sure if that's the one he betrothed, and you can't be with a woman's sister, it's not a valid betrothal according to Rava. So isn't this a tiyuf to the Rava? Isn't this a refutation? So Rava would say, no, no. That's talking about a case where there's just 2 daughters, one adult and one minor, and he's saying if he says betroths his daughter, he's betrothed the adult and not the minor. Mara says it can't be. Habogros Katani. It says his adult daughters are not betrothed, which also implies that he also has minor daughters. Habogros Katani. So the Gemara says, no, my bogros, what does it mean bogros? Doesn't mean he's got adult daughters. It means adult daughters in general, if the father betroths them stam without specifying, adult daughters in general are not betrothed, only minor daughters in general. So the Gemara says, well, Yachim, what's the chiddush there? Of course, we know he can't betroth his adult daughter. He can only betroth his minor daughter. The Gemara says, no, what we're talking about here is going to the Shavite Shliach, where the adult daughter appointed is her father to be an agent to marry her off. So Ma'al might have said, Kimikabo Kiddushin, that when the father accepts the Kiddushin on behalf of the adult daughter, on behalf of his daughter, he might have thought that he's accepting the Kiddushin on behalf of the adult daughter. Kamash Malan, no, we're not going to say that. He's not going to be accepting the Kiddushin on behalf of the adult daughter, even though she appointed him to be her agent. Because a person doesn't, his first priority is the thing where he gets the primary benefit from. And he's getting the primary benefit from his betrothing his minor daughter because that's where he gets the betrothal money. And from the adult daughter, she gets to keep the betrothal money. So we assume that he's betrothed the minor daughter. Versus not necessarily. Milo Askina, why don't we assume that the case is the Amrlek Kiddusha Didach? Why don't we assume that the case is where she said, betroth me, and you get to keep the money? Gemara says, we can assume that a person is not going to abandon a situation where he has a mitzvah to do it and marry and do something which he's not commanded to do. And so therefore, since it's a mitzvah for him to marry off his minor, his daughter, because it says Respanosechem Tenu Anashim. That's what Rashi says. And so therefore, that's his primary mitzvah, is to marry off his minor daughters. It's a question because Ritva says, didn't the Gemara say earlier that a person is not allowed to betroth his daughter when she's a minor until she gets older? How can we say here that's the primary mitzvah? So the Ritva asks this question and gives three answers. One is that even if she's a minor, if she has ability to have can have the ability to have consent if she's like almost an adult. Number two is if we know that for sure she would accept it, then there's no problem. And then it's a mitzvah. And we're talking about a situation that she was a Nara and it wasn't exactly a minor. So it's obviously difficult because this Gemara seems to contradict the earlier teachings that this is the primary mitzvah. So Tashma Mish. So again, we're trying to disprove Rava. So the Gemara says Tashma Misha Yeshlo Shteikite Banos. Let's say a person has the scenario here is a little tricky. He has two, but we're just going to be getting into trickier and trickier scenarios. But he's got two sets of wives. From his first wife, he has two daughters, and then he married a second wife, and he has two more daughters. And he says to a man, "I'm marrying you. I'm betrothing to you my elder daughter." So what does that mean? Misha Yeshlo. We learned this in the Mishnah in Samach Daled Amud Aleph. Somebody has two sets of daughters. From two wives. He says, I betrothed to you my elder daughter. And now later on, the man says, listen, I don't really know which daughter I betrothed to you. I don't know if it's Gedolah Shebekdolos, Im Gedolah Shebektanos, Im Ktana Shebekdolos, She Gedolah Mina Gedolah Shebektanos. Meaning, say, I don't know if I betrothed to you my eldest daughter from the first marriage, or my eldest daughter from the second marriage, or the younger daughter of the first marriage, which is really the eldest daughter vis-a-vis my younger daughters. So I don't know which one I'm married to you. So under those circumstances, we say Kuan Asuros Chutz Mikatana Shabaktanas, different Rebbe Meir. So under those circumstances, we're going to say that all of them are prohibited until they receive a get from him, except for the youngest daughter of all. So we see from here that this is that even though the Kiddushin can't be consummated because you don't know which one he really betrothed, nevertheless takes effect. So and they require divorce. There's a question on Rava. So Gemara says, no, the reason why Kiddushin takes effect is originally he knew which one he had in mind, and then he got all mixed up. Meaning to say that first the father knew, and then afterwards he forgot. And so now he doesn't know which one he betrothed. He was betrothing a lot of women at the same time. He doesn't know. He was doing a lot of things. He was involved in business. And so therefore he knew. So it took effect. Now he doesn't know. So therefore they all require divorce. And Dekanami, the Katani Eni Odeya, he says, I don't know. Katani Eni Odea. It doesn't say it's not known. So Shema Mina, so we see it was known at first point. it was known at the beginning. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, what's the chiddush? Of course they require a divorce. What's Rameir even saying? The Gemara is saying, Rameir is saying, Rameir's position is you can't know because we can't assume that the person would have done the eldest daughter and not put himself into a doubt. We see a person will put himself into a doubt, and so therefore we can't assume that. Okay, so now we'll stop here because we're going to get into increasingly more confusing cases. We're going back into Yevamos. It's not hard. It's just a whole another mahalach, and so then we're going to stop the recording here. And God willing, at 7:10 this morning, we'll start the davening with Hallel upstairs. Shkoyach to everybody. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address.